I reach out to Martha because I've been making this attempt to record a video on Mars joining the North Node and moving towards Chiron. And I got the strong sense that this is a conversation to share with Martha. So, Martha, thank you for joining me. Let's just share the visual of this for a moment so we can all see what's going on. Chiron joins the North Node this coming weekend. And from then till the end of the month, Mars moves to join Chiron. So we have really for the whole second half of May a very, very particular and potent evolutionary theme. There's a very, like, you can't avoid it. Mars is incredibly active, and I think this like Chiron North Node window is a portal energy. We had this Chiron North Node conjunction a few months ago, all of these eclipses recently on the Chiron and North Node. So there's a lot of activation. So to start, Martha, when you're looking at Mars, how do you personally define and understand the function of Mars? How do you work with that in transits?
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, this is something I've been thinking about a lot in the last month and a half, 2 months. And I can't remember how much of this I've said to you, either personally or even on a recording. So I might be repeating for you and or people listening. But what's been happening actually, I'm holding this astrology course this year, and last month we're going month by month through the year, through the zodiac, right? And then doing the corresponding planets with the sign of that month. So this month we're in the month of Taurus, Venus, etc. Last month we were in the month of Aries and Mars. And what I'm doing in the course is my foundation is my learning from you on what evolutionary astrology teaches and all of that. But then I'm going into these many, many, many other layers of each of the signs and each of the planets, especially the planets. So what came alive for me with Mars is that we're looking at the astronomy of each of the planets, not just the ideas about them. And what really, really came alive for me with Mars is that I looked at a lot of the NASA videos there, because there's so much out there from NASA videos and pictures, because the rover humans have sent rovers to Mars, right? So we can actually see this being. And what really came alive for me actually in the exploration both of Mars and of Venus is how when I connect and when we connect with the actual planet, the actual being, there's so much that I don't know. I think that's like the simplest answer I would give you is that I have in my mind the Ari Moshe Wolf answer of what Mars is. And I'm in this moment where it's all, I have the Jupiter Uranus conjunction was just on my Jupiter in my ninth house. I just had my Jupiter return like last week. So with Uranus there. So that kind of sums it up, right? It's like I'm in this whole unfolding and exploring of kind of the unknown and the not knowing of it, and sitting with what's really truly calling to me on a divine level of who these beings are. And I can say more, but that's the gist. That what came alive for me is that I feel like we've actually projected maybe onto these beings, Mars and Venus, and everything in our solar system, everything in our lives, actually, all kinds of ideas that may or may not be true about them. And so I'm in this moment of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but really trying to honor and be with the actual beings and see what is there in me and in you and in all of us, and give them a chance to really be seen and honored.
This
So
is why
yeah.
I felt in my soul to reach out to you.
Mm.
Part of what I see you doing, you had for 2 years a summit, Rebecoming the One Summit. And a big part of what you were working with, and also these books that you channeled, are really this reintegration and reimagining and healing of the masculine and feminine functions or forces in creation within all of us. And a part of what you brought together and what I see sort of mysteriously kind of continuing to unfold here is a reimagining of what is it to look at this without the conditioning and the filter of all the trauma and confusion that we've been overlaying on it. And I think we could appreciate that we're at this turning point right now collectively where we only know what we know. And we have to appreciate that the current mythological framework that we've used to understand these planetary archetypes are all sort of embedded in this tragic storyline. There's almost no mythology that isn't sort of heartbreaking or tragic by its very nature. And I think there is this necessary discernment that we're left with, that this generation is left with, as we're healing a lot of the conditioning of the past several hundred or thousands of years. And I think of it as moving up in the yugas. There's like a natural evolution and paradigm shift in our perception. We're needing to take these astrological archetypes, these mythologies that we draw upon. We know the synchronicities. So every single name that a planet has something to do with its meaning, and its mythology is relevant. But we need to discern what's the healed expression of this. And I honestly, this is true for every single planetary function. And we were just chatting about this with Pluto and Ceres, which maybe we can mention that in a moment. Ceres stations retrograde today. And that is exciting to me. And I think of all archetypes, this is really important when it comes to Mars and Venus. And I know we might both use different terms in terms of describing some of their associations, and I think that's common. But what I'm really interested in, not so much are the particulars or the associations, because that's something we all kind of come to, and there's a lot of our own personal filter or way of framing things that's natural. But what does it look like to relate to and understand and interpret these planetary functions progressively with a healed mind, right? With a mind and a perception that is less in that same story of separation and pain and suffering that we're so familiar with. So this is a part of what's really, internally drawing me to share this talk with you.
Yeah, that's exactly the overarching theme of my whole soul calling, as you know, just to name it, is I'm supposed to hold space for this time of great remembering, right? That's what the spirit world is saying, that we're coming out of that Kali Yuga time, and now we're coming out of the time of forgetting, and now what the spirit world says is they're very adamant. Now we're in the time of remembering. So even in our relationship with the cosmos, with the planets, with ourselves, it all mirrors everything, right? That we're needing to hold space for the truth of the wholeness of every being in existence, which includes planets and includes ourselves. And yeah, so exactly what you're talking about.
So let's jump into Mars. Maybe what I can do is start with my orientation to Mars, and we can use that as a launching to this discussion. And what I'm particularly drawn to, again, is a reimagining, a looking at this from a new and a healed perspective. And just to say why, anything on the North Node says that planetary function is, Jeff Green has described it as like a green light. Right? The North Node is our evolutionary growth. It's where choices and new awareness and growth is wanting to happen that pertains to our ongoing evolutionary direction. Right? Whereas the South Node, we're integrating content, but we don't want to get stuck there entirely. And so a planet on the North Node says, this is where evolution and everything in your life essentially is being integrated. So it's always useful to give attention to a planet when it's on the North Node. And I think this is extra significant and relevant for us to tune into because of that North Node Chiron window that it's moving through and all of the strong evolutionary activity that has just been charged around that North Node with all of these eclipses and in general the significance of a Chiron North Node conjunction that doesn't happen super often. So we can think of Mars as initiatory. Wherever Mars goes, it's going to instigate new experience, new activity, new choices, and take us somewhere that we've never been before. So
Can I
whatever
just
the
throw
deeper
in
healing,
something?
yeah, please.
So the Lelea Kuhanua, just to say, is actually going to be
Oh,
conjunct the North Node of the Moon also
I,
on
I love
June
that.
8th.
I love
Yeah.
this, right?
So
So okay,
yeah, keep
and
going.
just let's just think for a moment. I know, I mean, I come into it like I know nothing about it. You describe, and we were chatting about it, like that the name itself, it's not even a noun. The name describes a flight pattern of a particular bird that goes from Alaska to Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's fascinating to me.
Mm.
But being on the North Node, there's more healing, more relevance to this, and thus to what you're holding in that gathering than any of us under. Like, who knows what this is? Um, for a while, the North Node was on Eris. A lot of people were speaking about that. So it's always meaningful to track aspects, in particular conjunctions to the nodes, and sort of the mystery of, if you think of the nodes as portals, and it's sort of like it's beyond our linear time frame of thinking of things. The North Node is right now in this seemingly linear world that we think we're living in. Actually, what's emerging is this unfolding of growth and evolution that connects with the past and the future, all kind of coming in right now. Um, and the intelligence of it is so profound, so greater than any of us can fully grasp. So yeah, thanks for bringing that part in. It's also Ceres is stationing retrograde today and is squaring Chiron.
Hmm.
It's basically at a standpoint in its square to Chiron, and Mars will be joining Chiron in a very tight square to Ceres. So the recent interviews I've done with, or conversations I've done with Sol, I'll post below, on Ceres are like, this is really activated right now as well, and I highly recommend everyone checking those videos out. So when I work with Mars in transit, I think of it as this is where we are being instigated and stimulated by experience to make new choices. In evolutionary astrology, we learned that Mars corresponds to the leading edge of our evolutionary growth. It's a part of also like what you're doing is like there's always like I'm making new choices, and that's going to open new doors to where I've never been before. And I think what happens with Mars is we are acting instinctively. Right? We're impelled to respond to life experience in certain ways, and it points back to the reason for those actions, like the reasons for those choices. And ultimately, we reflect upon, am I going where I want to go? Right? Are my choices, are my actions taking me in the direction of who I want to be, of the person that I want to become? And this ultimately points back down to Pluto, meaning our underlying evolutionary program, desire. What do we truly want? Like the 10,000 options and choices that we make throughout life point back to what is it we're truly going for anyway? The more of a self leader we become, the more agency we claim in choosing our own soul evolution. That will reflect in all the many, many, many choices day to day, moment to moment that we make with Mars. And I want to emphasize with Mars that our agency, and I shared this in my last evolutionary themes video, is really more so expressed in what we're not choosing and what we're saying no to. The thoughts we're choosing not to think of, right? Like we're not entertaining these vibrations. We're not picking up this action because, ooh, that's arising, but that's not who I want to be. That's not where I'm going. I'm choosing to reorient and redirect towards a more noble goal and intention for my life. And so there's an element of we train ourselves, we cultivate ourselves, we develop strength and stamina and a sort of resiliency beyond the threshold that we've previously known because we're learning. Like we all learn from making really poor choices and doing hurtful and harmful things. And that we learn, okay, I feel this impulse, but I'm not going to act on it. And the thing with Mars, though, is that energy needs to go somewhere. So it's always going to open up a new threshold of what am I going to do with this energy? I need to empower myself into a new level of boldness and courage and strength. So naturally, with that said, Mars moving on the North Node towards Chiron is going to be really instigating fundamental new choices, new response patterns, new ways of responding to stimulus that will take us further in life. Um, Maybe you could help me with this quote. There's that saying the mark of a person's character is determined by how they respond to experiences when life is challenging, right? More so than when things are easy.
Hmm.
So we can have these really strong Mars experiences where it's confrontational, it's challenging. And I think the point is what it's pointing to is there's a threshold of new experience and a more empowered way of knowing ourselves that we haven't yet experienced or known. So these more confrontational or challenging times basically says, I haven't yet become the person that I'm becoming, so I don't know how to respond to this in an even more intelligent, thoughtful, kind, compassionate, embodied, strong, clear way. So that's how I would frame a basic intro to looking at the significance of Mars right now moving on the North Node. Also, it's the ruler of the North Node. There's a new way of moving forward, and we're really being pushed into it. What would you want to add to this before we move on?
Yeah. I mean, right. So here's my moment of being with these kind of things. So when I think about Mars or any planet, but let's take Mars, I hear the Ari Moshe Wolf version in my mind, just like you just did it for me. And there it goes in my brain, and I love it, and it, I agree with it, and it resonates and all that. And then I take a step back, and now I've been sitting with this actual being who's Mars, right? And Mars has, the planet has a lot of similarities to Earth, and it's supposedly kind of similar to like Iceland, which I've been to, and I love Iceland. And but except the big difference being that it doesn't have much atmosphere. So we wouldn't be able to breathe there. But
Comparing it to Iceland, by
some
the way, does make it very appealing.
yeah, yeah,
It's an
exactly.
interesting
I
spin
love
on it.
love yeah, I love Iceland. Um and um But something I've been really sitting with is that, of course, we named this being Mars after a god of war. Mars is also a god of agriculture. But have I already said this to you? Do you know that Mars has two moons?
We've chatted about this, but
Okay,
yes,
we've chat there. See, there are balloons. I told you
balloons.
before we start. I don't know what that was. Anyway, yeah. So Mars has two moons, and they are called Phobos and Deimos. And Phobos and Deimos means fear and panic associated with war and dread of war. Okay, so we have this planet that we've named after the god of war and agriculture, and its two moons are named after the sun, two of the sons of that same god, and it's all associated with war. And then on the other hand, literally on the other side of Earth, so Mars is on one side of us, Earth. On the other side of us, as Earth, is Venus. And so, not in evolutionary astrology, but in other versions of astrology, we've called Mars the malefic, the bad planet. And then over here on the other side of us, we have this Venus, who's called good planet, a benefic, right? And Venus is associated with god of love and beauty and fertility and blah blah blah. So what I've really been sitting with is so then on an astronomy level, actually, let me say this real quick. Venus astronomically is the hottest planet in our solar system. It has tons of volcanoes. Venus in mythology was actually, I think, was married to Vulcan. Anyway, a god associated with volcanoes. I could be totally wrong on that, but that's coming into my mind. I think that's true. But anyway, the atmosphere of Venus is very, very thick, has tons of pressure, and we can't send, unlike to Mars, humans can't send a rover to Venus because it will get crushed because the pressure there is so intense. And so on the one hand, the orbit of Venus makes this beautiful rose shape that we know about, right? That
Yeah.
definitely reflects that beauty and that harmony that we associate with Venus for sure. That's absolutely true. And then at the same time, Venus is so intense and passionate and like hot. So what I've been really sitting with both Mars and Venus is this idea that we polarized them. We've made Mars bad and violent, and we've made Venus good and sweet and nice. And but yeah, is that actually the case? Is that actually true? I don't know. And what does that really reflect about us and our relationship to the masculine and the feminine and men and women and gender and all of it, right? So
Wow.
again, I don't have an answer. It's just that's where I am with all of it.
I really appreciate that reflection. There's a tendency, I mean, I don't work with malefics or benefits in my own work,
No,
but
no.
there's still a tendency to sort of, because of our conditioning around these planetary archetypes, to perceive them in certain ways. And I think we often fail to recognize the extent to which Venus, not unlike Mars, can also have a very, I mean, Venus corresponds to the archetype of self-interest. It's all about I want to, it's fundamentally about survival and pleasure and embodiment, but that has a dark side too. Right? A Venus transit, which could be very graceful and easy, can easily be one of selfishness and indulgence. Whereas a Mars transit, when we think of Mars as, violent, strong, right? But that can be used to fight or act or do something courageous for a noble cause.
Hmm.
I think there's so much truth, and I can't even express the depth to which this feels important to me. The truth of these planets being neutral in their essence and not implicitly associated with a quality of good or bad couldn't be more emphasized.
Hmm. Yeah, and actually I just was thinking, Chiron, the transiting Chiron is sitting on my own Venus right
Right
now.
now. Yeah.
And Uranus has been squaring my own Mars. So,
When I reach out to you about this talk, Mercury was right under
mhm,
Chiron.
on my Chiron.
Yeah. Yeah.
Conjunct my Venus. Conjunct my South Node. Yeah, it's all perfect.
So,
Hmm.
do you have more to say, or can I share a thought or reflection on something you brought forward?
Oh no, yes, I'm sure.
Good. Okay.
Yes, keep going.
So, taking the idea that Mars corresponds to war, literally the god of war, has been considered as a malefic planet. I want to take a moment to reflect on just our relationship to the masculine function, and I'll speak to how I define this, because not all astrologers will think of it in the same way. Um, to me, I definitely correspond the function of masculinity to Mars. Right, it's that yang principle. Literally, physiologically, it rules the testicles, corresponds to that, right? Um, of course, Mars isn't inherently gendered, but we can say as an archetype has a correlation to men as a whole. There's a natural association based on the basic physiological correlations, right? In the same way that I think of the moon as the feminine function. Moon literally rules the breasts. So there's a physiological reality between the moon and women. Of course, the moon doesn't only correspond to that. So thus, we can't look at Mars without also kind of appreciating culturally, historically, how we've thought of men and the role that men have played for a very, very long time. Mars rules war. Most wars have been fought and initiated by men. Has always been that way, not all of them, most, and is still that way. Men in general have been the dominant, within patriarchy, as per the word, have been the dominant forces. And there has been a lot of violence towards women, towards the earth. Men have been the oppressors. There's no question about that. And that doesn't say that all beings don't have their stuff as a whole. That's just how it's been. We're looking at this time of evolution and reframing our understanding. And this is taking us to the heart of reframing our understanding of the Mars function, reframing our understanding of masculinity. Because it's just fascinating to me, there's so much implied in this. Calling Mars malefic, thinking of it as malefic, which has often been the case for many, many hundreds of years in astrology, simultaneous to Mars corresponding to all these wars and violence that men have waged and fought, in a way is sort of making a statement about how we feel about men.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is an important thing. So I was doing some research as I was preparing for these talks, and I was blown away. And this is a part of the larger like internal sense of reaching out to you about this. Women are diagnosed with depression um, more than men, and possibly they're seeking counseling more than men as well. But even so, statistically, men commit suicide in the United States at least 4 times more than women. Even more so, which race of men have the highest suicide rate? The white race, right? White men, which is arguably, right? You can't disagree with this. The most privileged group of humans on this earth that have historically probably en masse caused the most damage and violence,
Hmm.
without question,
Hmm.
are also the group of people that, I don't know what words to use, but what does it mean to want to end your life? Like, what's happening on the inside? This is the loneliest, lost, misdirected, hurt, confused, unsupported, and suffering. I don't want to say it's more suffering than others, but there's an immense amount of suffering and turmoil and pain in this like dominant population of society,
Hmm.
and we haven't yet learned how to meet that in a loving and conscious way, because what's happening right now is we're healing all of this like violence and hurt and rape and things that have just been happening for a long time. Well, naturally there's a lot of anger, and that's natural, right? But with that anger comes this phase that we're exploring right now of call out culture, you know, um, calling out and canceling culture. And I think on the other end, in the awareness of all that's been done and all the hurt and pain that the masculine function, in particular in the form of men, has created, there's an immense amount of guilt. What do I do with all of this masculine energy?
Yeah.
How do I express this yang principle when this very thing has caused unspeakable and is still causing unspeakable suffering and pain? I must be bad and wrong. I must be malefic.
Hmm.
And
Exactly.
and this is, yeah, this, so I'll stop there. I would love to hear whatever you want to jam on this.
Yeah, I could say so many things. As you said, I did two whole entire symposiums on this, 2 years in a row, but like a total of 80 speakers. If anybody wants to go watch all those 80 talks, they're all still available for free on my website. But yeah, I mean, yes, right. So and just to throw in on I completely agree with you on all of that, and to throw in the side of Venus, what I've been sitting with is, so we've been basically saying men bad. I mean, not it's that's overly simplistic, but in a sense, right? But then the message to the feminine is the only choice is for you to be beautiful and sweet and nice and harmonious and all those things. And anybody who has a female body is going to say, excuse me, if that's how I'm meant to be, that's basically like killing myself. Like, no, that's not who I am. I'm everything, right? I am, we all are feminine and masculine all together. But an example I keep using is I had someone say at some point, I was getting really passionate about, so like, I have Venus and Aries on my South Node conjunct Chiron, and I have Eris opposite my Pluto. So I'm like, like to the degree. Um, and I have a lot of energy in me that's very much passionate about justice, right? So I was having a conversation with someone about something, and this person said to me, I'm hearing a lot of energy of justice
Mm,
coming through in what you're saying. What I think is really needed is the energy of the divine feminine. And so what I wanted to say was, but that is my divine feminine. That is who I am as the feminine, you know? And so, but more simple example I can give about that is when I get protective of my kids, it's not that I suddenly become a man. That's not my masculine side. That's me as mama bear, right? Like that's me as intensely feminine, just a very, very powerful feminine. And I do have other sides to me that are masculine, but that's not that. You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So
You
yeah,
can't gender these planets at all. It
yeah,
just falls short of reality. Yeah.
yeah. So so um so just anyway, I'm just balancing what you're saying with also bringing in the Venus part.
Thank you for
But
bringing in that
yes,
Venus point too, by the
yeah,
way. I mean, everything that we can have these rich discourses for every single planetary function. I think Mars and Venus are kind of like the space holders for all of it.
yes, totally,
Yeah,
exactly, right.
yeah.
And so I can just say what I did in the Rebecoming the One symposiums was, like last year it was a 4 week long thing, with a whole week dedicated to the divine masculine and a whole week dedicated to the divine feminine and a whole week dedicated to the divine person, meaning gender fluidity, gender non-binary experience, etc. And then a week on bringing it all to wholeness, rebecoming the one, right? So it's not either or, it's all of it. Like I'm so completely dedicated. Absolutely. It's a huge part of my soul calling to fully be present with this healing of the divine feminine and fully be with present with the healing of the divine masculine and fully be with all of it together. But something that I found really interesting that you and I have talked about and that I have talked about a lot with Chris Skidmore is that when last year when I held the week on the divine masculine, something that was really heartbreaking for me and very difficult was that the majority of what went on in that week, um, was there was a lot of, in my experience, like sort of the men showing up and the masculine showing up and saying, hey, we want to be part of this healing, and then not showing up. Like a couple of people that literally just didn't even come to the divine masculine panel. They were supposed to be on it. Like literally they didn't come. And you were a speaker and was a speaker, but you weren't actually in that particular week. You were speaking on the bringing together of the two, and Chris was speaking about a different topic. So there were wonderful men involved. Like it wasn't that men were absent. It was just so fascinating and heartbreaking for me, really, and exhausting that the week on the divine masculine was really difficult, like really, really difficult. The week on the divine feminine was easy. It's like, no problem.
Sure,
We know how to
sure.
do this. But you see what I'm
And
saying?
and I mean that's sort of a part of the whole piece that we're speaking of here. I'm actually in a men's group right now, and the essence of the practice is really about being able to hold space for each other to connect with emotional discharge and meet content that I find as a whole, it's actually really hard to do. You have to trick my mind to get me to cry,
Hmm.
and it has to actually be in a relational sphere where that becomes accessible, I think is an incredibly difficult and hard thing to do. And so much of this relates to, the general conditioning that we've all been a part of. I want to speak to just to really honor that there's no one in the world that isn't suffering from the unchecked conditioning that we're all healing from right now. I
Yeah.
did a recent talk with my friend Bradley on the EA Association on Neptune Venus aspects and Neptune Jupiter aspects. We looked at Madonna, and I had this really interesting rabbit hole of exploration around culturally the messaging that's being spoken around women and beauty. Madonna got a lot of press recently for some sort of award show where she came on, and her like face was very clearly overly like plastic surgery up. People were
Hmm.
commenting, "Oh, she's really unattractive, too much focus on physical beauty." Um, and this one person had a viral post where she put a picture of Madonna next to her mother or something, who's the same age as Madonna, and showed the difference between someone who got a lot of plastic surgery versus someone who is, quote, aging gracefully.
Hmm.
And I read this perfectly beautiful article dissecting that post because her mother, same age as Madonna, who is aging gracefully, you can tell her teeth were more likely than not, re whatever that word is when you get like the caps or whatever. It was perfectly white, maybe right. Her hair definitely dyed. wearing lots of makeup. There are so many things visually in the image, just from the makeup and the hair dye alone, that said, if you're aging gracefully, a part of what culture is saying to you is put a lot of effort into your appearance with cosmetics, with hair dye, to make it look like you didn't have to put any effort into your aging gracefully. Women as a whole, this is a Venus thing, are told and conditioned and really raised to say, you have to always be beautiful and graceful. And as you get older, do whatever it takes to put forth effort to make it look like you're not putting forth any effort, to continue to look like you're aging and looking gracefully and beautifully all the time.
Yeah.
Even her demonstration of plastic surgery versus aging gracefully was unconscious of the
Mhm.
immense amount of conditioning and pressure that is put on women. So that's Venus. Like, we could have a talk on Venus and go deeply into that rabbit hole as well. Let's go to the next level here. Mars moving towards Chiron in this window. So all the themes that we're speaking about right now, I think, are really up right now. And like, the larger evolutionary question that I would bring forward is, how do we embrace this call for agency and leadership and self-trust with this North Node Chiron energy? North Node saying you got to go there. Chiron is saying there's a lot of tenderness and vulnerability in it. What do we do with this Mars function, with this masculine energy, when there's a lot of anger, when there's a lot of grief, when there's a lot of self-doubt, when there's a lot of guilt and shame? I think a part of the healing right now, and we're all going to experience and internalize this according to our own soul program. And again, ultimately, this transcends gender, because I think there's really no one in this world that can't, if we're honest with ourselves, find all of these dynamics and pressures exist within us.
Yeah.
And everyone who's been persecuted, it's very, I don't know if anyone in the world exists who at some point along their soul journey hasn't also hurt another person. Dealing with these dynamics and saying we have to make choices now and claim um, a greater threshold of resiliency and strength to respond to challenge and experience, that says you got to trust your life. And this is sort of where it comes home for me. We know that Chiron speaks to, the metaphor of the one-armed swordsman, right? That's the archetype of, or the archer rather, right? Like Chiron being an archer but only having one arm, or something like that, right? I'm not a mythology person, but the metaphor being, you have this function to perform, but you're impaired. And so long as you're focusing on the impairment, you will not believe that you can perform the function, because an impairment literally means that function and the ability to perform it is impaired. Only when we're focusing on performing the function will we not be focusing on the impairment. So to be focusing on our function and our purpose means we're going to work with our impairment. We're going to yield to it and allow it to inform a new way of being that only we can discover. But the sort of the hurdle is overcoming the the fixation on I'm broken.
Mm.
There are these things that I've done. The guilt can be an impairment within Chiron. It doesn't always have to be a physical reality. It can be the emotional memory of what I've caused, and thus I feel guilt in doing this thing that I know I don't feel like I can do because I'm lacking in some kind of essential wholeness. It's only in doing it and actually restoring our function, kind of picking up that archery again, picking up the sword again and saying, I'm going to try again, where we allow ourselves to find our medicine. We allow ourselves to find our humility, where we're going to find a way of doing it. But this time, we're not going to be able to cause the same pain or hurt or destruction that we've caused before, because our hearts are breaking open.
Mm.
And I think healing happens full circle when we return to the very place where the hurt and the wounding happened,
Mm.
and we decide to start again. And this to me is kind of the remedy to cancel culture. What does a famous person or a famous musician do that is genuinely self-reflective? Okay? They're beyond maybe a very common defensiveness. You know, they've done bad things. They've done hurtful things, but then society has called them bad and wrong. What is a person to do? Right? Internally, it's like, I can't show up in public. I can't act in another movie. I can't put out another. I can't do any more concerts. They have to actually transform from within. And it's not like a Saturn thing. You do your jail time, you do your public service, you demonstrate that you're on good behavior. That's not Chiron. You actually have to initiate yourself to a deeper dimension of healing and medicine. And that only happens by starting again, but you're going to be a different person. There's going to be a tenderness and a vulnerability, a deep, deep presence and awareness of the pain, of the wound, of what you caused. And maybe you're still acting out these behaviors. Maybe it's not fully healed. Maybe you know that you can't fully trust your conscious embodiment of that masculine energy. Because coming back to the men talk, most men don't. It's actually really hard to. And actually, let me just be even more universal and true. Most people don't, right? We can think of in general, like let's take the picture of an archetypal heterosexual date, right? Of a male and a woman. The man is afraid to make an advance, to show his interest because I don't want to be too aggressive, right? That's violating, right? And so then archetypally here, the woman is like, well, I don't really, he's not interested, he's not brave, he's not courageous enough, he's not willing to really, risk anything. I'm not really interested. That's kind of like inside of all of us, we have that kind of dynamic manifesting within all people. Are we confident enough in being courageous and bold and forward and direct and making choices? What if I offend someone? What if I'm going to be rich? Like that Libra South Node is that affinity. I got to make sure I'm liked, I'm not hurting anything. We are going to make choices, all of us, that are going to piss people off. We're going to make mistakes and act too, again, this is all people. We're going to act too strong, too aggressively. We're not going to listen when we should be listening. Or we're not going to be assertive enough when we're supposed to be assertive. We're going to overstep boundaries. I once, talked to someone, actually, I won't give that example, but that's a person's chart. But, we're always in a field of relationship. That Aries Libra dynamic is, you can't just be in your own sphere doing whatever the heck you want to do. But at the same time, you have to have a certain entitlement to do what you got to do. And navigating that wisdom is only a thing that we can each do for ourselves, because if we're not claiming our own soul leadership, we're going to be depressed and feel very uncomfortable with ourselves. And of course, if we're acting unconsciously and just doing whatever the heck we want, eventually there's guilt that we're going to have to face. Like, we're going to have to face the consequence of being unthoughtful and unconscious.
There was one energy of Chiron that I was feeling super strongly that I know you would feel in Chiron, and I was feeling, because I do have Chiron sitting right on my Venus. What's coming through my being, what's coming through my body is compassion and love, right? And that feels like that Chiron. I mean, I both have natally Chiron conjunct my Venus. It's like a pain, but a beautiful, like a beauty, love, compassion, pain. Does that make sense? Or I think it's like feeling,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I
Does that feel like
understand that.
Chiron to you?
It
Is that,
does.
yeah.
Chiron brings tears.
Mm-hmm.
I often find, because it's like, it's really touching place with an actual hurt place inside, and actually taking the medicine and also giving the medicine at the same time.
Yes.
It's always how Chiron works.
I think the overall sense I'm getting of, for all of us, just in general, of the Mars coming to the North Node and Chiron is this feeling of when we're trying to do, we all want the same thing. We all want that rebecoming the one. Like, we all want the wholeness. We all want this time of remembering. We all, I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think in general, that's what our goal is to remember ourselves as source. And the saying, we're walking each other home, right? That whole thing. I think that's, anybody listening to this probably feels that. So how do we get there, and how do we do that? And I think as we're coming out of this time of forgetting, where all of this pain absolutely has occurred, is still incredibly prevalent on our planet. It's
Yeah.
undeniable. So then what do we do with that? well, I think one of the answers is this Mars conjunct North Node and Chiron and all of it. And it's what I feel in that is the sense of like I could get angry and upset. I could uh do the polarity thing. Or what I'm more drawn to is this feeling of love. Like I'm just present and I love you, right? I love the person I'm being. That's not always going to be true, obviously, but um there's some kind of healing balm that I feel in this transit, this an opportunity of like a healing balm. And I'll throw in one more thing that feels really important, which is for those of us who maybe are in more female bodies, where we're like, well, but I don't want to sit there and just say I love you and everything's fine.
Mm.
That's not what I'm advocating either, because again, it's the Libra Aries balance and integration, right? So I think part of this whole healing is the Venusian feminine quality having permission and actually even being celebrated to be her wholeness too, right? So that we can be fully present in our full being, our full power, our full self. And it's not like I'm sitting here saying, oh, XYZ doesn't bother me, it's fine, and doing the fawning thing. That's not the point. The point is to be both present, but also again, not always possible, but in this moment with the Chiron energy, also filled with love, present and filled with love at the same time, right? And present with whatever the truth happens to be, even if the truth is, hey Ari, XYZ didn't feel good, or hey Martha, XYZ didn't feel good. Be totally present and totally present as love all at the same time.
Okay, Martha.
Beautiful.
I think we'll save the series thing just as a special notice, honorable mention. Series is stationing retrograde now. Tune into it, check it out. Check out Martha's talk tomorrow. Promotion for myself. I offer sessions for individuals and couples, as well as long-term soul-to-soul companionship work. For those that want to study with me more deeply, you can check out my classes page. I have a wide selection of classes, series, courses available for self-study. And very soon, I'm going to be starting my Neptune aspect series every Monday on my YouTube channel. So just stay tuned to see when I begin those. Do you have any other announcements, Martha?
No, the free gathering, again, it's May 15th, 2024, but available forever. Yeah, I'm going to be holding another free gathering on summer solstice, and yes, just connect in any way you
You have
feel
a site
called.
though. You have classes and products for sale, correct?
I do, yes, I have an astrology course, and I have other energy healing courses and spiritual stuff, channeling stuff. And I have my own YouTube channel, of course, and I would love for you to subscribe to that if you don't already. I do sessions. I have some time available for that. Uh, all
Great.
the things, all
Good.
the things.
People should know. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you, Martha, for joining me. And everyone, thank you as always for watching.